The 11:05 p.m. cross-town bus was a rolling tomb, and Alara was just another ghost. The air was thick with the scent of wet wool and exhaustion. Outside, the city was a smear of neon and rain, a world that moved too fast and cost too much. Inside, Alara cradled her sleeping 5-year-old daughter, Lily, on her lap, a small, warm weight that was both her anchor and the millstone around her neck. Her second job at the all-night diner had ended an hour ago. Her feet ached with a sharp, persistent throb, and the bus's gentle sway was a siren song to her leaden eyelids. Across the aisle, a man in a wool coat that cost more than her monthly rent stared out the window, his profile sharp and unreadable in the intermittent light. He was a world apart, smelling faintly of sandalwood and clean, crisp money. Kaylin Thorne. But she didn't know that. To her, he was just a space to avoid, a reminder of a life she'd never touch. Alara's head lolled forward, a jerky, losing battle against the crushing fatigue. Her thoughts drifted to the eviction notice tucked into her bag, the final demand from the daycare, the gnawing emptiness in her own stomach. Just for a moment, she bargained with herself. I'll just close my eyes for a moment. Her body betrayed her, her head, heavy with dreams she no longer had the luxury to dream, tipped sideways. It came to rest not on the cold window, but against the solid, surprisingly forgiving warmth of the man's shoulder. Kaylin Thorne stiffened. He was in the middle of a silent, furious battle of his own. His company, Thorne Industries, was swallowing a rival in a hostile takeover, and the final documents were burning a hole in his briefcase. He was a man who commanded boardrooms, who built empires on precision and detachment. Personal space was a non-negotiable fortress. And now, a stranger, a woman who smelled of fried food and faint, floral shampoo, had breached its walls. He turned his head, ready to deliver a cold, sharp word that would freeze her in place. But the words died in his throat. In the dim light, he saw the sweep of dark lashes against pale skin, the utter surrender in her slack expression. He saw the tiny, perfect child curled against her, one small hand fisted in her worn coat. And he saw the tracks of dried tears, glistening faintly on the mother's cheek. His own heart, a muscle he'd long since disciplined into silence, gave a single, inconvenient thud. He didn't shove her away. Instead, he stilled, becoming a statue for this unknown woman and her child. He adjusted his posture minutely, giving her a more stable perch. It was an act of inexplicable grace in a graceless world. The bus jolted over a pothole. Alara jerked awake, disoriented. Then, horror dawned. She was leaning on him. Him, the CEO, the king of this late-night chariot. She scrambled upright, her face flaming. I'm so sorry. Oh, my God, I'm so sorry, she stammered, her voice rough with sleep and shame. I didn't mean to. I'm just so tired. He turned fully to face her. His eyes were a cool, assessing gray, like a winter sea. They didn't look angry. They looked curious. It's fine, he said, his voice a low baritone that vibrated through the quiet bus. Long day. It was such a simple, human question. It undid her. A brittle laugh escaped her. Something like that. She tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear, her hand trembling slightly. Lily stirred, mumbling in her sleep, and Alara's attention instantly snapped to her daughter, her whole world narrowing to that small face. She adjusted the blanket around Lily with a tenderness that was so innate, so absolute, it was like a physical force in the space between them. Kaylin watched the entire ritual. The worry in her eyes, the gentle shushing, the way her body curved protectively around the child. He dealt in assets and liabilities, and this woman's entire being was an asset to this one small life. It was the most sound investment he'd ever witnessed. She's beautiful, he said, and the words felt foreign on his tongue. Alara looked up, surprised. Thank you. A pause. The bus announced her stop. Panic flickered in her eyes. She had to gather their bags, wake Lily, navigate the rain-slicked streets to their crumbling apartment block. This is me, she said, already shifting, preparing for the struggle. As she stood, hoisting a sleeping Lily onto one hip and fumbling for her grocery bag of meager possessions, a small, worn notebook slipped from her coat pocket. It fell to the floor, splaying open to reveal not words, but sketches. Delicate, breathtaking drawings of fairies and castles, of a little girl who looked just like Lily, dancing in sun-dappled forests. They were illustrations of pure, unadulterated magic, a stark contrast to the artist's weary reality. She didn't notice. She was already hurrying down the aisle toward the doors. Kaylin bent and picked it up. He meant to call after her, to return it. But the doors hissed shut, and through the rain-streaked glass, he saw her disappear into the gloom, a silhouette of struggle against the city's indifference. He looked down at the notebook in his hands. He flipped a page. There was a drawing of a dragon, so whimsical and full of character, it felt alive. On the opposite page, in neat, cramped handwriting, were notes. Dragon's fire not destructive, but warm. A source of light. Name him Ember. He was the CEO of a global conglomerate that had just acquired a floundering children's publishing house, Once Upon a Time Books. They were desperate for a new, hit series. A fresh voice, the editors had pleaded in yesterday's meeting. He'd dismissed it as sentimentality. Now, sitting in the near-empty bus, holding this forgotten piece of a stranger's soul, a plan began to form in his mind. It was not entirely altruistic. It was a merger, an acquisition of talent. He needed her art, and, a part of him he refused to acknowledge whispered, he wanted to see that protective light in her eyes again, this time without the shadow of despair. He had her book. Now, he just had to find the author. 1 week later, Alara was wiping down sticky tables at the diner when her phone buzzed. An unknown number. Her heart leapt into her throat. The landlord. The daycare. She answered, her voice thin with apprehension. Alara Vance. It was a woman's voice, crisp and professional. This is Helena Ross, head of editorial at Once Upon a Time Books. We came across your portfolio and we are profoundly impressed. We'd like to offer you a publishing contract for a children's book series. Alara nearly dropped the phone. Her portfolio. She hadn't submitted her work in years, not since before Lily was born, when hope was a commodity she could still afford. What? How did you? We have our ways of scouting unique talent, Helena said smoothly. We're prepared to offer a very significant advance. Life-changing, one might say. Can you come to our offices tomorrow at 10? We'll have the contracts ready. The world tilted. Alara's knees felt weak. This was the miracle, the answer to every prayer she'd been too tired to utter. She accepted, her voice a trembling whisper. The next day, she walked into the sleek, modern offices of Once Upon a Time Books, a subsidiary of the Thorn Industries empire, feeling like a beggar who had stumbled into a palace. Helena Ross was everything Alara was not, polished, confident, and wielding a contract that made Alara's head spin. The advance was more money than she'd seen in the last 5 years combined. We want your dragon, Helena said, smiling. The one you call, Ember. We want a 12-book series. Your artistic control will be absolute. It was a dream. It was too good to be true. And as the old adage goes, if it seems too good to be true, it usually is. The door to the lavish conference room opened. And he walked in. The man from the bus. He was no longer in a simple wool coat but in a tailored suit that screamed of power and privilege. His gray eyes, which had been curious a week ago, now held the cool, possessive gleam of a man who owned the room. The air left Alara's lungs. Alara, Helena said, rising. This is Kalen Thorne, our CEO. He extended a hand. His grip was firm, warm. Ms. Vance, a pleasure to officially meet you. Alara's mind was a whirlwind. The kindness on the bus, the found notebook, this contract, it all clicked into place with a sickening finality. This wasn't a miracle, it was a transaction. He'd seen a desperate woman, assessed her assets, and made a move. You, she breathed, pulling her hand back. This is because of the bus. Kalen's smile was faint, professional. Your talent is undeniable. We simply facilitated the connection. But the way he looked at her wasn't professional. It was intense, searching. Over the next few weeks, as the contracts were signed and the first advance cleared her bank account, paying off every debt and securing a bright, safe apartment, his presence was a constant. He'd appear at the studio they'd rented for her, under the guise of checking on his new investment. He brought gifts for Lily, not extravagant toys, but thoughtful ones, a set of high-quality colored pencils, a book of fairy tales. He was dismantling her defenses brick by brick. He saw the artist in her, the mother, the woman. And against her better judgment, Alara began to see the man behind the CEO. The one who had been her silent pillar on a late-night bus. The one whose eyes softened when he watched Lily chatter about her drawings. She was falling in love with him. It was a terrifying, glorious freefall. One evening, he took her to a quiet restaurant, overlooking the city lights. The takeover of his rival was complete. He was triumphant, expansive. To new beginnings, he said, raising his glass of wine. His eyes were warm on hers. And to the most remarkable woman I've ever met. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was it, the moment the Cinderella story became real. "Alara," he said, his voice dropping, intimate and sure. "There's something I need to tell you. About the company I just acquired." She leaned in, a smile touching her lips. "What is it?" "Vance Toys," he said. The name was a physical blow. It was her family's company. The company her father had built from nothing, the company his partner had ruthlessly forced him out of, a betrayal that had broken her father's spirit and hastened his death. It was the reason for her poverty, her struggle. It was the ghost that haunted her past. Her smile vanished. "What about it?" "It was the final piece of the puzzle," Kalen said, a note of pure, unadulterated triumph in his voice. He was too caught up in his own victory to see the devastation dawning on her face. "The hostile takeover I was finalizing the night we met on the bus, it was Vance Toys. I've wanted it for years. And now," he took her hand, his grip firm, "it's finally mine. I've dismantled it, absorbed its best assets. The name is gone, it's over." He looked at her, expecting her to share in his joy. But her hand was ice cold in his. The world shattered. The kindness, the contract, the apartment, the gentle looks, it all rearranged itself into a monstrous, horrifying picture. He hadn't been saving her. He had been consolidating his assets. He'd taken her father's company, the very source of her ruin, and then, like a god playing with mortals, he had picked up the broken daughter too. Was it guilt, a twisted sense of completion, or was she just the final, sentimental trophy in his conquest? The fairy tale crumbled to dust, revealing the brutal corporate warfare beneath. She pulled her hand back as if burned. The love in her heart curdled, replaced by a pain so acute it was physical. "Alara," he asked, his confidence finally faltering as he saw the tears welling in her eyes, not of joy, but of utter betrayal. Her voice was a broken whisper, laced with a heartbreak that would never, ever heal. "You," she said, the word trembling with the weight of 1,000 shattered dreams. "My father's name was Robert Vance." The unforgettable twist wasn't a ring. It was a revelation. The prince wasn't saving Cinderella. He was the one who had burned her castle to the ground. And Kalen Thorne, the mighty CEO, stared at the woman he realized, too late, he truly loved, and watched as his entire victory turned to ashes in his mouth.